Welcome to the Gaia Report. I'm Crystal Johnson, your host, and we have a very special guest today. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Bisbee. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Kathy is the executive director of Brookline Interactive Group, where we film the Gaia Report. It is a community resource for different shows, storytelling, and we're going to be talking to Kathy about the impactful work that BIG focuses on, specifically regarding bringing together innovative progressive technology such as AR, VR, and climate issues, and how it's been used as a tool for some really impactful work. So before we get into that, we'll leave them in suspense. Please tell me about your background, because It's quite fascinating. Where are you from?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank our team at BIG who helps make your show possible, and so many of our members who come in. We have an amazing team here, board and staff, and this community is an awesome community, so I'm really happy to be here. So I'm from Western Maine. I'm from a small town of about 400 people in Western Maine, and I left right after college and went to California for 22 years. And drove across the country by myself with my dog, and arrived. I did have an uncle in California, so I ended up living in Santa Cruz, California. And my first third of my career was in community organizing. I worked for CalPIRG, the California version of MassPIRG that used to exist. I think still is around. And I did environmental organizing work, everything from endangered species. I worked with college students to clean air, to clean water. I worked with a lot of college students to help them think about ways that they could protect the environment in Santa Cruz and in California in general. And also worked on lots of political campaigns during that first 8 years. And then I was in technology for 13 years.
Oh, wow.
And the last 10 years I've been in community media. It's actually my anniversary. I just had my anniversary of 10 years in community media, and so it's been really interesting to see the work that we're doing here, BIG, really be a convergence of my technology education work and product development and management with media and storytelling, and also community organizing and social justice and environmental issues. And I was also somewhere in there, started making films and have had a couple of films that I've taken to film festivals as well.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So I'm a storyteller, and I come from, my dad went to the New England School of Broadcasting on the GI Bill.
Okay.
So definitely broadcasting in the family.
Yes.
And my mom was an English teacher from West Virginia. So I have some deep roots in storytelling and music and youth development work, actually.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
Well. And certainly growing up in Maine, the environmental, I think that really formed my concern and care for the environment.
I can imagine.
Just when I was in college, my biology teacher was actually the first Green that ran for, I think he was running for governor at the time. Okay. And also Congress. And so I had him for biology, so it was wonderful to sit in his classes and have him talk about old growth forest and going up to Katahdin and seeing the old growth forests that actually were saved in Maine back then as a result of some of his work and others' work. And so I contributed in my small way for that, and that continued after I left Maine as well.
That's wonderful, because the work that BIG does, I know they've supported me in the Gaia Report and the environmental work that we do out in the community, but then for me to also learn that for a lot the leadership here with your background and what you're passionate about, your history with community involvement and also technology and how it all comes together, it really made me understand that for the last year with some of the efforts that have happened around eco-hack. I'm going to have you introduce that and where it's blooming to, that I can see then how you've led it and your background, and it just seems like a wonderful marriage. So I wanted to say, please tell us about EcoHack, because it's extremely fascinating and very impactful.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we came up with the idea, well, let me start a little bit before the EcoHack, because a lot of things kind of came
Oh,
before
sure.
then. We, my fiance runs Northampton Community Television.
Okay.
It's funny you use the word marriage. And so he and I met on the National Board for Industry. It's why
Okay.
I decided to move to Massachusetts.
Okay. I'm glad you did.
Thank you. Me too. Me too. It's actually on so many levels. It's really been a place where the combination of the resources and the kind of community that Brookline is,
Yes.
and my own academic and intellectual exploration that's possible here was really different than it was in California. Certainly miss California, but
Right.
there's things that are really different about Boston, and that
Yes.
Boston really leads in a lot of ways.
It
So
does.
and Brookline, is really known everywhere. Even in California, people knew about this community. So I
Oh, that's
think
wonderful.
it speaks a lot to
Yes.
this community, and I'm really grateful to be here. So I think for me, I really, a lot of the work I did in California really informed the work that I'm doing here.
Okay.
And we lost all of our funding in California for community media. So all of our operations fund that has funded community media for the last 34 years,
Oh,
35
wow.
years, went away. So we had no operating
Wow.
funds, no staff, no personnel, and only had capital dollars for equipment, which really changes the nature of
does.
community media.
I
and
can
I
imagine.
always looked at the Massachusetts people and I thought, oh gosh, if I only had their resources.
Right.
So I felt very lucky when I moved here. I kind of consider this the land of milk and honey for community media. And it's also what drives me around creating programs that are replicable elsewhere.
Okay.
So that if I have the resources here, I feel I have a responsibility and obligation to create programs that will help
It's true.
support community media reinventing itself
It's true.
and being able to gain the recognition for the really relevant, important work that we do, not just in the innovative space, but also the work we've always done for 35 years that sometimes I think people forget about. They sometimes will think of us as Wayne's World, and some of our shows are, but we have a lot of high quality content and people who are really developing in just exciting ways here at Big, and we're also doing all this really amazing innovation work. So I started looking at how we could do that here in Brookline
Okay.
with the resources that we had and the team we had. And I was looking into different ways that we could tell stories.
Sure.
So I wasn't a gamer. I didn't really think of VR a whole lot. And my partner is very interested in sort of the intersection of theater, immersive theater. So he took me to Sleep No More in New York City as one of our first dates. I was terrified. But it was also amazing because I realized how interactive it was, where you're in a warehouse and the actors are moving from room to room and you can choose to follow them. And so you sort of had this agency of storytelling that you don't have in watching a single frame of
Right.
television or film.
Right.
And I was fascinated by this on a storytelling level and a sense of kind of embodied theater.
Okay.
So you really felt like you were part of the play
Yes.
in a way. And then we saw at the Future of Storytelling, also in New York, we saw the Syria refugee story that I think it was either the New York Times, it wasn't Nani de la Peña's, I think it was the New York Times' project. So I went inside an Oculus Rift or Vive, and I watched the story of this 12-year-old refugee girl from Syria in France at the camp. And I was so moved by the time I took the goggles off. I was in tears because I really understood the intensity and the urgency of the Syrian refugee crisis in a way that I hadn't. That was fall of 2015.
Wow.
Coming out of that, it was almost immediate. We started ordering VR equipment, and I really thought, we need to be telling stories in this medium. If I was that impacted in a really embodied way,
Right.
how else could we tell stories that might affect change in our
Right.
community and in the world? And I realized that community television stations are ripe for this kind of innovation and have the capital resources and have the resources to try things and pilot things. So that's really where it all started. And then from there, a little bit because I'm just excited about environmentalism in general, but also we wanted to have a hackathon, and I thought, nobody's done a VR-related hackathon before. Why don't we do one on climate change?
Sure.
And see what kind of narratives come out of that inside of the VR space. And so we lined it up so that the hackers, we had 150 registrants sign up.
Oh, it's amazing.
It was amazing, really was. And we had 60-40 male-female, which
Okay.
is incredible. MIT, I think at their first hackathon that they had, which was about 4 months or 6 months before ours, they had only about 18% female. So we had a really diverse, both ethnically and gender represented hackathon, which I thought was really positive, that we're a community-based organization with not the resources that MIT has putting on this hackathon. And we focused on environmental education inside of VR. So whatever project you did over that course of that weekend should be focused on environmental education and a theme of climate change. Our partner at Harvard Graduate School of Education, who is helping us to sort of think about how we might do this, came in right before the hackathon and said, hey, I just talked to my friend at the UN, and they really want to pitch the hackers on focusing a little bit on pollution, because that's what all the ministers had chosen that year for their topic at the United Nations Environmental Assembly. So we did have a little bit of focus on that, but mostly it was climate change focused.
Nice.
So that's kind of what led up to it.
So the Eco Hack, that was last year in April 2017, April 22nd.
Yeah.
And so what was the intent of that, and who were the people? They were artists, programmers, like what was the group that was attracted?
You know, it was an amazing group of people. And it was also still pretty early on in VR. I mean, we're still really nascent even now, but a year ago, imagine how different it was.
Yes.
So we had 13-year-olds to,
oh, wow.
I want to say about 7-year-olds. We didn't ask people their ages, but that would be my guess. So that was wonderful to have a lot of diversity in age as well. And some people who were environmentally focused, some who were just interested in technology and wanted to figure things out. We had some people who were marketing people who weren't technical but thought, hey, I can think about sort of the product. We had environmental educators who came. We had some professors from different academic universities show up, and we had about 20 mentors, which was amazing. We had folks from the entire VR community represented in different styles of hack as well. So it was interesting. What came out of it was we had 3 prize-winning teams at the end.
That's so great.
Yeah, it's amazing that they make it through a 3-day weekend, because it's a lot of work. And one of them had never created anything in augmented reality before. And so they had a HoloLens that comes with a little visor, and you could actually see a hologram, and you can walk around it. So you could have a human body or a globe and walk all around it, but still see reality through the HoloLens. And so they had never programmed in augmented reality before our hack, and learned it over the weekend.
That's
pretty amazing. Yeah. And then another group did it in web VR, which is a very accessible tool or an accessible way of viewing VR content on the web. Most people have access to the web, so a little bit more accessible than having to buy an expensive VR headset.
Right.
So we had another group that created their outcome, their educational curriculum in web VR. And then another group did it in plain old VR. So we had 3 different modes of creating VR content inside of the hackathon, which was pretty incredible.
So VR is virtual reality.
Yes.
So at the hackathon, how did they use VR? Can you like visually describe what they came up with and how it would be applied?
Sure, and we can actually provide some clips too.
Oh,
we have
wonderful.
like a nice little
we'll have
promo.
some great clips. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm trying to remember, because it's been a year or so, and I haven't looked at it recently. But we had one team was it was more gamified, so you could actually throw things into a dumpster versus recycling, and you get points. Another team looked for things inside of your house that were more ecologically conscious, and how you could make choices in your home to do things in a more environmentally friendly way. And then the last group, theirs was, I think it was the ocean acidification education piece. So they were showing sea level rise, and you were, if you're inside VR and the ocean's coming up around you, it's pretty intense, because you really feel like you're there. There's a strong sense of presence in VR.
I actually just experienced the VR in different scenarios, but the underwater one, and it was the most incredible experience I ever had, and it was so real, and it was amazing. This humpback whale came by, and it was just a beautiful experience. It was just so vivid.
Yeah.
So I can imagine then how it could be applied as a tool, and it really resonates with people. It really sinks in. It matters. They can relate.
The way that I describe it to people is this. So, imagine you have a fishbowl over your head.
Yes.
So that's 360 video. So we could
that's
put a
it,
camera
yes.
in the middle of the room and you could see everything all around us. So we also made a 360 video
Okay.
that we took to the UN too, just to show people that modality for
Okay.
storytelling.
Okay.
We wanted them to see the difference between that and some of the other tools that we were demoing
Okay.
at the UN. And actually, just to give the backstory, we didn't use any of the EcoHack pieces for the UN because they wanted something a little bit more developed. So we spent 5 months after that being on conference calls with the UN and 5 different people from 5 different departments, trying to figure out what we could create for them that would be really helpful to talk to their ministers and heads of state about air pollution, because that was their theme for the year.
Got it.
So we ended up creating a 3D globe with all of the air pollution data from the last 35 years mapped on every country on the globe.
Nice.
And so you could spin the globe and you can
Oh, that's
actually
amazing.
see each country's particulate matter levels, and you could actually move the timeline scroll bar by the year to see how it had gone up or gone down. And there's also some narration that we recorded over different countries so that you could maybe hear a little bit more about the regions and what's happening in the region
That's
in general.
amazing.
So that's kind of the end goal, was to
Right.
create that piece with the UN in partnership with the UN. But I lost my train of thought here. There was something else I was explaining to you and I've now forgotten.
Well, one thing I did want to just quickly recap for everybody is that a year ago, you created this Eco Hackathon.
Yep.
And for the virtual reality, had the 32 people here for 3 days, did this phenomenal group projects that they came up with. And you had mentioned 3 examples.
Yep.
And that really then was on the, the progressive edge of technology. And it was relevant. It's great to use it for a game or for fun, but to really apply it to a global issue,
Right.
and to have it serve as a sustainable solution tool, and seeing where it could be applied. And then while you were just doing this for this great pool of people of 150 who came from different places, there was a connection that was made with the UN, and then were asked to come to their environmental assembly in December, and to not only just come, but to develop a customized VR tracking air pollution and particular matter, which is, I think, it's measured ppm. So
Yep.
it's like cubic square, within a cubic square, how many pieces or parts are contaminants.
Yep.
And it's a critical environmental public health issue.
Definitely.
And that really has to be tracked because, as we know, environmental issues are public health, but definitely with particular matter. And you crafted this VR tool.
Yeah, we did it with a partner
that's-
named DataVice in
Yay,
New York
that's
City.
wonderful.
Also has a female founder.
Okay.
I just want to give props to Deborah
Yes.
Anderson and her team, because they took a big risk in partnering with us because they didn't know where it was going to go or how much effort would have to go into
Right.
it. But we just launched it online actually last week. So you can now go on our website and you could read
Oh, that's
all about
wonderful.
our trip
Okay.
to Nairobi. You can see pictures of us with VR goggles on giraffes that are obviously photoshopped,
that
but
and
lots of
wondered,
fun.
right.
And we did go on a team safari, so that was pretty amazing as well. To be, it actually changed my whole take on zoos, because I realized how magical these creatures are, and giraffes, as I just
Right.
heard last week, are actually now endangered. And so we were so lucky to be able to see that firsthand and have that experience, both at the UN, meeting people from all over the world, being able to talk to them about VR and how it could potentially change the narrative around environmental and health
Yes.
issues.
Yes. One thing I do want to highlight, because you had mentioned it, and just to connect them, is that it seemed that for the hackathon, that Big was able to attract a very diverse group, more so than, as you referenced, at least at one of the MIT events, as
Yeah.
well in others, because in technology, it's usually male-dominated.
Yep.
Yet you were able to attract an incredible pool of diverse participants that created an incredible tool, and then through a network out to the UN and partnered with a organization that's also led by or co-founded by a female tech, and then was able to go further, now have global impact. And so that's really great to witness that having inclusion, have equity has tremendous impact and value,
Definitely.
and then that's where solutions lie. So I didn't want to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Now, can you tell me about how long did it take Big with DataVice,
DataVice.
DataVice, excuse me, to come up with that VR for the air quality, for the air pollution? What was the process?
Sure. I think they were already working on a 3-dimensional globe, and
Okay.
it's part of a tool set that they have released.
Oh, that's great.
Where people can actually put other data sets on that
Oh,
globe.
that's nice.
So I think that's a great resource for the world in general.
Sure.
I mean, you could put all kinds of data on that, and they have. So we were able to then meet with them and talk about how we could map the air pollution data to that tool,
That's great.
how we could modify the tool, improve the tool, and they've done quite a bit of work on it even since we went to Africa. And we love it because it's in web VR, which is more accessible.
Okay.
So you don't have to have a headset in order to view it. You can just go on a web
Okay.
browser on your mobile phone.
Oh, that's
and you can
great.
see it and you can interact with the globe.
Oh, that is great.
Yeah.
So then how many people from Big joined you in December in Nairobi?
So there were 3 people from Big,
Okay.
Nir Duram, our lead creative designer,
Okay.
and Andrew Doig, who is our IT sysadmin person.
Okay.
And so the 3 of us, and then my fiance came on his own
wonderful.
dime, which was helpful. And then our partner from Harvard School of Education and her husband
Okay.
came as well. Also, it helped a lot with costs. The UN paid for us to come.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So that was really helpful as a nonprofit, but we did have to fundraise a little bit of the cost to get us there. And then we took 4 giant, really giant cases, Pelican cases this big.
Oh, wow.
We took 3 virtual reality headsets, the HTC Vive, took an extra case for all the other things. I was really holding my breath going through customs. Someone said to me right before the day we left, no, I think it was the week before, they said, oh, I sent some VR equipment somewhere and it took 3 months to get through customs. And I just went, oh my God, you've got to be kidding.
Right.
No. So
can't.
it scared me into action, which was good. So I wrote a nice letter on our letterhead with the letter of invitation from the UN,
Nice.
and I laminated it and I put it inside of each case.
Oh, that's perfect.
And sure enough, when they opened the case at customs and they saw the UN logo, we were through.
Beautiful.
So it helped quite a bit. Yeah.
That is
I am a
great.
producer through and through, so I earned a few more producer stripes on that trip for sure.
And when you were there, you presented. Now, who did you present this to?
So we were set up in a big tent, actually,
Okay.
and we had a lot of problems with the sun because the sun can affect VR equipment negatively. But I had to buy these big Kenyan tapestries.
Okay.
I was trying to find a market, and so I bought these big tapestries of beautiful fabric, which we brought back with us. But I had to cover the VR equipment so that it wasn't negatively impacted. And of course, right before the Assistant Secretary General of the UN Environmental Program
Oh, wow.
showed up minutes before everything crashed because of the sun spots that we were having on the equipment. And then Andrew, bless his heart, got everything working.
Yay.
And we got to show him the experience, and he was really impressed by it. But we were in this tent environment with other exhibitors that the UN had invited, like
nice.
us. Yeah, and then we were also speaking on a few panels that they had invited us to participate in. So I spoke on a panel on art and activism.
Oh, that's great.
And I used some art from my Santa Cruz friends who run a program, O'Neill's Sea Odyssey, that they take kids out on big catamarans from
Okay.
O'Neill Surf Company. I think they donated them, or they run the program, and they go out in the ocean in Santa Cruz in Monterey Harbor, in Monterey Bay, and they have the kids write thank you notes, but most of the kids do art.
Okay.
And they send them the art. So they had all this wonderful art. And I was so inspired by the art that the kids were creating.
Right.
I thought I should really show this at the UN about why art matters in
Yes.
activism and how art can change people's perception, change the narrative, create
very
awareness. And so I really was just looking at the panel thinking, how did I get on this panel? These people are amazing. Some incredible artists who are, one who is creating, using trash to create these beautiful sculptures that are like spirits.
Oh, wow.
And he was talking about sort of how most Africans believe in some kind of spirit world.
Yes.
And so he felt like that was a way that he could provoke people and make them think about taking better care of the earth.
Yes.
So I thought that was pretty neat.
The role of art and activism is huge. And just to add in is that Town of Brookline has an annual Brookline Youth Climate Adaptation Challenge that I had found it, and it's coming up shortly. But last year, 2 great youth artists, just call the names, Bradley and Char, were eco artists. And while I love having the science aspect and people come up with creative big ideas, they drew this beautiful butterfly. And within the different components of each wing, one showing more if we were heading towards not making changes, so we're heading towards a demise as far as ecologically non-sustainable, versus a thriving, vibrant lifestyle. And within different parts of the wing, there are 16 different components noted. And I just said emotionally they were able to relay complex issues so succinctly that touch people in a way more than, and not taking away from the science part, than any other one science story could, just with that. And that is the value of art.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I get that.
And data can do that too. Graphic design, data, maps.
Yes, visual, it really does.
All of that, and film, and VR.
Yes,
and I think one of the things that's amazing about VR is, it was amazing to us having shown VR mostly. We had done demos here. We do demos here every Wednesday night from 5 to 8. People can come in like you did and try VR. We want people to understand the technology and understand the medium. And the storytelling part as well. A lot of times people will think it's just games, and so we also have stories that we show folks. But we had done that with mostly Western folks, mostly Americans, and a few other folks. And so going to Africa and going to Kenya specifically, Kenyans are actually one of the most technologically savvy countries in the world, especially developing world. And so I think the health ministry actually, it was the first place where SMS, like text messages, were coming from the health department of the government via text. I don't even think we do that very often here. So they're very tech savvy, and they just have like this very inventive quality. It's one of my favorite places I've traveled, actually. I've been to like 22 countries. Because of their spirit, they loved Americans because we're so much more extroverted than the British. And so we just, every time I get in a car with an Uber driver, I tried to learn Swahili before I went, just so I'd have something that I could talk to people about. And we learned instead the language of young people, which is called Sheng, and it's Swahili and English mixed. So we learned that, and every time we got in the car with an older person, an older Kenyan, they were like, no, you should not speak that. That's very bad. And then we'd get in the car with a younger person, and the younger person would just laugh, and and I would say things, I would learn things from men, so I would say them as a woman, and they'd think that was just the funniest thing on earth. They're like, I would say, Nyaji Buddha, which means like, hey, what's up, man? And they thought that was hysterical. So I mean, we had a wonderful time learning about this culture, but this culture, I think, is a very inventive. I'm surprised that there are more tech folks coming, and I think that will probably happen because there's a workforce there that could fit into lots of technology companies and startups. Actually, it's an undervalued workforce, I think. So when they were inside of VR, it's a very big cultural difference, and so their reaction was also very different. So we saw a lot, almost every African person from the continent was ducking and, like, whoa, just these amazing, like really animated reactions to things, and then wanting to talk to us to learn about the technology, which was super exciting for us to hear that people had that curiosity and that they were interested in how the stories were being told and how the technology was working. So we found a nice place for us in terms of the reception that the Kenyans offered and the Africans in general, and that the UN offered us as well.
Nice. Yeah. Now, just in closing, can you share with me what the next steps are, or what you're looking forward to? Sure.
Well, really what we're trying to do now is to, we're trying to show that a rising tide lifts all boats. So we're trying to help other community media centers. So we have VR toolkits that we're selling at cost to these other media centers so that they can do the same thing. We're providing trainings for them in filmmaking. We have a VR Eco Hack coming up again in 2019. So
that's exciting.
We're getting hopefully Mozilla involved and the headset manufacturers. So hopefully we can have an even bigger event and have it be very hands-on for 2019. And then we're also working on a national immigration collaborative filmmaking project.
Oh, wow.
So whole nother kind of topic area, but we feel that ties in nicely with some of the things that are interesting to the Brookline community around immigrant stories and talking about where we come from and sort of this idea that we're a nation of immigrants and being able to get people to share their stories and understand the stories of others and that we're not others, we're all one.
Oh,
so that's
beautiful.
kind of our next project that we're working on, and then the Eco Hack we'll start working on very soon as well.
Oh, that is great.
Yeah.
For those who are interested, you can look up Brookline Interactive Group in Brookline, Massachusetts for information about everything that we have shared, as well as for the next Eco Hack in 2019. And we're going to show a few clips right now regarding the virtual reality from the Eco Hack. But I want to say on behalf of Mother Nature, thank you for leading in all this environmental, sustainable solutions tools using VR and media.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Enjoy.